What is the difference between a confident electrologist and a nervous one? It isn't experience. It's knowing what all those settings actually mean.
And what if that shiny machine you spent thousands on has features you've never used? Not because you don't care, because no one ever really taught you how.
Today, we're going under the hood. Blend, thermolysis, galvanic, no matter where you started, it's time to truly learn the language of your machine.
Welcome back to Electrolysis Unplugged, your after-hours mentorship chat for all things about electrology. From science to technique, it's the business of it all.
I'm Joanie.
And I'm Stephanie. We co-founded Electrology Education Coalition to raise the bar on electrology education, safety, and real-world skills in our profession.
Today's conversation came from a couple of great listener questions. One about feeling confident with galvanic, and another about how energy levels are calculated when switching between microflash, multiplex, or blend.
But as we read them, we realized this isn't just about galvanic. It's about the stage that every electrologist hits. When you've got solid hands, good instincts, but you still feel like your machine is smarter than you.
Yes, and you know what every electrologist has said at some point? I feel like I'm driving a Ferrari in second gear.
So in today's episode, this is called Beyond the Presets, Mastering Your Machine, Not Just Your Modality. Whether you're trained in thermolysis, blend, or galvanic, we're going to help you connect the dots. Hello.
As we slowly gear up to tonight's topic, this episode's actually going to be about mastering your machine, not just the modality, right? So we're going to dive in a little bit deeper about presets and energy levels and modalities and what that all really means.
All right. So I'm so sorry about that. I still had students on the floor and I had to say something real quick. So when we think about this, when the time is limited, right? And like as it live moment, right? Like we're here like at the school still. Instructors are typically very focused like on getting you through a spot that like makes you licensed and competent to a point where it's not necessarily like all the advancements on variations, right? But like it is about what modern machines can do and getting you to feel good enough behind the filament that when we release you to the wild, you're not stabbing at people and you're actually making insertions, not pokes, right? Mm-hmm. That's the goal in that space.
Yeah. And I mean, every program emphasizes something a little bit different. So some schools train predominantly in blend, others more in thermolysis. And this can be dictated by state board requirements or machine preference or lots of different reasons. But once you graduate, that's when you need to start your practice and realize that if you're only comfortable in one lane, so you're only doing microflash on the machine or just only doing blend on your machine, everything else might feel kind of like a foreign language. Not sure where to start.
Oh, yeah. And I honestly would say that it's pretty completely, I think it's pretty normal for that foreign language thing to happen. I think that there's ways, just like in learning a language, there's ways for you to immerse yourself in getting more comfortable in those spaces. But I think that it's normal. I think that people don't understand that you don't master a modality, like, which sometimes I feel bad about how I chose my name, like, as like Zap Master, like, in those moments is like, I know that it gives an opportunity to tell someone like, you're getting to a mastery of this, right? But like, you're not going to be there immediately. I think that like, it's what matters is being curious enough to learn it how, since you won't learn it now in that space.
I have kind of a funny story, and I think I've told this to students in the past, but when I first started with electrolysis, I had an SX500 as a machine. That's an Apilus machine. It's now discontinued, but it's very similar to like a senior machine as far as the interface, the modalities, and everything like that. And for a long time, I only worked with the modality thermal flash. So on the Apilus machines, for example, you do have all three modalities: blend, thermolysis, and galvanic. But then every modality is going to have their own proprietary sub-modalities. So when people talk about microflash and synchro and all these things, these are thermolysis modalities specific to the Apilus machines. So I was only using thermal flash. That's it. And then the presets. And part of it is because I just didn't understand enough about my machine and what it could do. But
Mm.
I swear, I would joke that like I turned on the machine one day, it was on thermoflash, and I just never changed it. And
I
that
mean,
was the extent of my beginning in this, up until I took the initiative to learn a little bit more about it.
I was the same way with blend. My mom handed me her Clareblend Ultra Blend. I have the machine in the museum, and the dials were set.
Like set, and that's it.
They
You
were
never even
there.
twisted them a little bit.
And so sometimes I get a little brave and I would like move it a little bit, but I was like, oh God, what if I do
Like, what I do, is it going to explode?
Yeah. And I did the same thing, like mulch needle originally, like when I was learning that, it was like, I mean, all of our machines were dials, not buttons. And so wherever that was set that my mom last did those services on was where I walked in the door doing services on them. And it was just, it was hard. It was a necessary thing that we had to think about.
Well, because then if it doesn't work, you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the problem, right? Like if you just get stomped, it's just, you have no idea how you can, like, you're just there with your client and you can't remove the hair. You don't know how to change your machine, what modality or setting you should be trying it out or why. And so there's a deeper understanding that has to happen there. And I guess our point is, as you can tell from both of our stories, which are pretty much parallel, is that it doesn't come right away. I went to school and did 600 hours. You trained chair side. So it doesn't really matter, like as far as how you did it. And in school, I did some blend and I had a Hinkle, the one with the air tube.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So like I trained in everything, but it's just, there's so much thrown at you when you're in school that you leave when you think your job's over. It's not. It's just beginning.
I think that's like, I think we need to bust that myth. I think that like the idea that like the one way that we might have initially felt most comfortable in school, might have learned in school, or the person, the technique, whether one hand, two hand, whether it's auto start, foot pedal, two pedal, one pedal, whatever that is that you had initially that you got comfortable with, right? Or it's like when you first do something and we want you to get comfortable to a point where you feel confident walking into a room in the sense of, we know how much time it takes to go to school. Okay.
Yeah.
And we understand that there's a financial obligation. There's this commitment part that is a hard commitment on top of the cost of going to school. There is no point at any point in our teaching lives that we have not considered that. But the myth needs to be that it's not that was the best thing that you learned at that time or the worst thing that you learned at that time. It's what you learned to get yourself sufficient enough to understand that was the question that got you in the door. And now we get to start understanding how many ways we get the job done.
That's right. And really the job depends on accuracy.
Oh,
and that's really what schools teach, like above and beyond. Yes, how to use your machine and how to properly understand time and intensity. We try, but really if you leave with understanding insertions, energy delivery, target destruction, then no matter what modality you picked, already you have a pretty strong foundation.
Yeah,
so funny comment in the chat here. So Michaela said that the person that she learned from had a Proteus machine. It's pretty old. Yeah. And she had nail polish marks on the timing and intensity knobs. And that's what she used for everyone.
Oh, I'm so
there was no customization of any kind there. So, and any hair was whatever. Probably had the same probe size for everybody.
Oh, totally.
I would doubt that it was probably even changed. Right. So everybody gets the same treatment.
Yeah. Those are those moments when I look back at the early days of Stephanie's zapping and I'm like, well, people got,
learning happened. Mistakes were made.
They got done. I think that your modality is a vehicle. You are the driver. But if you don't know how to shift gears, the potential in that spot, like I'm not a car person. It's just easier for you guys to understand. Sometimes that same is like, if you don't understand the potential of what that vehicle can do, right? Like I have an SUV. Do I drive it like an SUV? No. I have an SUV because I have kids and it's not a sports utility vehicle. It's Stephanie needs to haul, large instruments to and from school. And that's the vehicle I needed. But could I learn all the ways that my car can tow things and do those things? Yes. But I have got to do that to live up to its full potential. As technicians, we're striving to go after the full potential of your machine. So I think that the starting conversation about this is like, living up to that is important.
So let's break down what your machine is actually doing. So three things will control energy delivery. First thing is intensity. Second thing is timing. And the third is waveform.
Oh yeah, intensity. So like think about it like that. It's how much you're pushing out, right? So it might read milliamperes, it might milliamps, microamps, percentages, numbered scales. Sometimes you'll see graphs on certain machines. It does depend on your machine. Higher intensity means more current, more heat in these spaces. Longer timing, shorter timing is an adjustment of that.
So timing is how long that current is applied. It's usually going to be measured in seconds or milliseconds. And if you shorten the time, then you often have to raise the intensity to compensate. So we talk about things being inversely proportional.
Yes. So like when we think about the waveforms, so like let's think about our mode selection here. So this is going to be how that energy is then distributed. It's the steady flow. It is a pulse or a flash of current. It is an understanding of the blend of that current. If it's an electrical reaction versus a chemical reaction within the follicle, and that would be like your waveform in that space.
Exactly. And thermolysis tends to use high frequency to create heat in the follicle. Galvanic will use direct current to produce lye, and blend will use both simultaneously.
Yeah. And let's say, for example, you hit that magic preset button that Joanie and I definitely don't have an aversion to presets, but let's say we hit presets here. Okay. So we had coarse hair. We said it was a chin area. Your machine is making assumptions. I tell my students this all the time. We are thinking about moisture gradient of the skin. We're thinking about presets in this space, the insertion depth, even the humidity of the area that you're working in. So if you're in a dry climate and you need moisture in the client's skin, how do we then deliver that? Your machine is assuming that it is prime space when I hit those two things, coarse chin, right? It's also assuming possibly the filament that I'm using in that space, right? Because I picked the modality that would be best fit for that.
That's right.
Educated guess, have a guarantee.
So there was a question. We're going to get into units of lye, energy levels, and all of that kind of a little bit later in this conversation. So I'll read it, and then we can definitely kind of put a pin in this. But so units of lye is universal, right? And the answer is, yes, within certain constraints that we'll talk about. And so is there a universal energy level scale? And technically also yes, but there's more variety when it comes to high frequency current or AC current versus DC current, which was what makes it kind of a little sticky.
Correct.
So when you talk about presets and the differences that there is with not just the machines and also the technician doing the work, but the skin moisture probe size that Stephanie was all talking about, that's the reason why two electrologists can use the same preset and get totally different results. So the machine doesn't know your client's tissue resistance or hydration level yet, right? Maybe in the future.
Hope if that happens. I mean, like, I feel like it's understanding like how, like, if it doesn't understand the differences in our two treatment rooms. So Joanie and I, both in areas where we have more humidity because we're both in more coastal regions, right? Or more wet regions, but we also have experienced droughts and that kind of stuff. So you're going to see those changes, but how my machine's going to work in a colder area is going to be different than how hers does in Southern California. There is a vast difference in that space. So understanding then what like those settings are going to actually do in that space is going to help them us adjust with an intention and intelligently. And I think that and then helps us go with like it stops us from like second guessing ourselves as much in a preset. But in that same space, once you hit that preset and it stops working, then we start doubling down on the second guessing. This is like quadruple guessing at this point because you're like, but the preset said that would be prime in that moment.
Right. And that it should work. And so therefore my machine's broken.
Yep. That's it. It's over.
So if some of you cook, think of it like baking. If the recipe says 350 degrees for 10 minutes, but your oven, the altitude where you live, the humidity might require certain tweaks, you tend to learn to read the dough, not just the timer. I had an oven at my old apartment that I knew anything that I put in it, I needed extra time. It just didn't get as hot as some nicer ovens, right? And so you just kind of have to adjust to whatever you've got. There's a question here about maybe a clarification. We talk about tissue resistance. So this is a concept of skin impedance. And actually, I'm going to go into that in a future lecture, 2026. But skin impedance is the skin's natural resistance to the propagation of electrical current. So it actually fights the current from penetrating too far into the tissue itself. And so there's a certain amount of pushback that you get, or resistance. So certain wavelengths have a higher skin impedance, so there's more resistance from the tissues to it propagating. Some have less, depending on what it is. And so there is some slight differences there. Dry skin, for example, tends to offer more resistance than moist skin. And we see that practically when we work on clients, right? And that might be like the most obvious form of tissue resistance that you might encounter.
You feel physical traction in those spaces. It's a sizable change to the skin. When you were talking a little bit about like how like the oven cooks differently, and you're like 350 for 10 minutes is going to be way different when I'm baking something versus when I'm cooking something, right? And what is made up in that space. So like when we think about that, like the dough being your follicle in this space, instead of cookies, bummer. We are looking to make permanent results on what is in front of us in that space. And even in that like doughy consistency, like obviously like when you're thinking about cooking in that spot and you were saying dough, it makes me think of like, like a focaccia bread is going to have a much different setup than a croissant, which is going to have a much different setup than a sourdough, right? And how that 350 would impact all of those breads would be vastly different. That's because the makeup that we're dealing with in each one of those is going to change what those ingredients are, shifts in that space, because within our own body, the ingredients that we are working within, that salt water to our body, when we talked about the skin impedance in that space, like these things impact, and the more that you can get your client to like a status quo, whether that be balancing out within like anaphoresis at the beginning of it, getting a client to pre-treat with like setting up their skin successfully, like within using a moisturizer and an SPF and a gentle hydrating cleanser kind of thing, like we talked about recently, like whether that is getting them to just drink a bottle of water sometime in that week prior to their electrolysis,
Today's broadcast is brought to you by the California Electrology Academy, a premier school dedicated to advancing the art and science of electrolysis. Whether you're just starting out or pursuing advanced training, the Academy provides hands-on education and mentorship to help you succeed. Learn more at electrologyacademy.com.
Their kidneys and their liver are going to help be happy too. But like we are thinking about all of that. And so going after a preset is understanding that like you don't have the full details of that client until you see how that preset reacts with that client in that spot.
And can we talk a little bit about what presets are? So when we're talking about looking beyond the presets, we kind of have to understand what presets are even referring to, right? Yeah. So machines of, back in the day wouldn't really have presets, right? Instantrons don't really have presets. I know that the Apilus machines have presets. The Silhouette Tone machines have presets, right? Mm-hmm. And so presets are just there to make things easier for the technician. Yeah. But a preset, when we talk about like chin coarse, like a coarse hair on a chin, how are presets set up in the Silhouette Tones? Like if you put something, is it like
hair density?
So like hair coarse,
yeah,
chin so coarse.
Like, it'd be thin, medium, coarse, extra coarse, like.
And then is there body parts or just?
There is body parts, but I honestly will tell you those body part ones. I'm pretty much all machines. I'm not a fan of it because it's thinking that a face, so a PCOS patient, if you pick cheek, okay, on face, you've got to then pick your coarseness of the area then you're working in. So like
it might assume like not the hair issue that and I understand that, which is they do that with the male and female settings with the Apilus. And so technically you would be better off if you work off of presets on the XLs at least to pick like a male chin for coarse PCOS type hair, because it's assuming thicker hair just based on gender. But
Yeah, and that's part of the reason, like, I know that you and I have talked about this, like, and I'd rather go off of a body part based on hair density, like
Mhm,
like assuming that every part that I'm picking is accelerated vellus or terminal, okay,
mhm.
in those spaces, and giving me like a range of, say, fine, medium, coarse, okay, and then the body part versus on gender, because if I put gender on the front of my machine and my client happens to look over, whether I'm working on a cis or trans woman,
No, I get that. Yeah.
man, they're going to have a cow.
But this is where then if you understand what the presets are really telling you,
Mhm.
then it makes no difference, you know? So I always think, so you pick a female setting and just go higher
Yeah,
because
exactly.
you understand what time and intensity means and what that chin 5 really says. And
That's
so
actually
you,
what I did when I got my Apilus, is I went into all the male settings and I looked to see what my preset said compared to my female settings. And then I wrote
Mhm.
a graph next to my machine when I got used to it, and then got to know what my vellus, accelerated vellus, and terminal rates were on the machine. Like that's,
Yeah.
but then again, I'm not working in presets at that point. I'm like, oh God.
Yeah, I mean it's not, you know, it's not that complicated, but so when we're talking about presets, it's easy to kind of let the brain sleep on those and then always just kind of default to picking a preset and then not really understanding what that preset means.
Mm.
I have kind of another story. I've told this before. So sorry, you can tune out if I, you know, I repeat myself a lot. But this was actually when I was on a training abroad.
Okay.
And I was training a group of electrologists in a different country. And we had a bunch of Excel machines, and there was an issue with some of the machines. And the issue was that essentially like they had really, really low power output. And so they had to be cranked up really, really high in order for any kind of release to happen. And what I mean really, really high, I mean that I needed at least 3,000 energy levels just to remove like a regular chin hair. Now, here's the thing. If I didn't understand time and intensity and also like how to watch the skin and what good releases should look like, I probably wouldn't have been able to do the training.
Mm-mm.
Because if I just was stuck on the presets and saying chin 5, it's not working, I got all the chin 9, now what do I do?
Right.
Well, I can manually increase time and intensity to be really whatever I want it to be. And this is kind of how I had to conduct the training. We got through the training, machines got fixed, everything was fine. But in that moment, I'm in a different country and there's just no available recourse, you know? And so you have to understand what you're doing beyond those presets. If you're picking chin 5 and you are working there and chin 6 is too much, for example, and these types of settings, by the way, are going to be Apilus specific.
Right.
Um, but one good thing is that you can go in between settings. And by going in between settings, you're kind of doing a manual thermolysis at this point. You can do this. We do manual blend. I like the manual blend a little bit more on the Apilus machines versus the presets.
Oh
But
yeah.
knowing how to set your intensities are going to be important above and beyond just picking presets.
Well, and that's part of it. I mean, like, kind of one of our next things that we have like listed to talk to you guys about is getting to know your machine. Because, like, when you walk into a space, like, you've got to play with your technology. Because if you had gone overseas, gotten a faulty machine, had to do a training, and then just been like, well, this is where your levels are going to be when the machine's good. Would you have just done a tweezing session? Because you don't want to put it way outside of the parameters because chances are you might burn out the interior of your equipment. Um, if it's have it that faulty. And I think about like when I first got my Apilus, and I was learning from my scale was much different on my Gentronics to my Apilus. I went from a Gentronics multi-channel 160.
And sometimes that learning curve is something, right? When you go from like certain technologies to others, and it's a daunting jump.
Oh,
I'm probably going to be experiencing a good amount of that when I go to Australia for sure.
it was a very hard shift for me. I was not only because I was already using a little bit of flash because I was doing a lot of pulse thermolysis within the Gentronics. When I started learning how to do flash modality, I started learning how to do pulsed current. And then we got our Apilus, and I remember my client being irritated because they had noticed that they could see, because your interface was up, and I would always keep my machine upwards, because like on the XL, Pro, and Pure, you could raise and lower your interface, your front of the machine. And so I had it up so I could like get to know my machine and that kind of stuff. And my client's like, well, why do you have me at like 20% for only 50? Or sorry, 0.2 for 50%. And I was like, it's getting the hairs out though. And I'm like, yeah, but can we do more? And I said, well, I don't need to do more because your hairs are releasing. Well, why then do you have the ball that can go all the way up? And so then I had to show them. I literally I went into the multiplex so they had more places to play.
Yes.
And I set the preset to be the same ELs that we were doing within Synchro so they could see. And I said, we have the ability to damage.
Blow a hole in your skin?
Yeah. Like I am the Death Star in this moment and you are a small planet. And so I have the opportunity to blow it up, right? But I also have the opportunity to burn out my machine. And while it can do those things, it doesn't mean that it's supposed to be balanced out like that. And so I threw everything up and then I selected a stainless. And then it put like my ELs at like 50,000. And I was like, what I need for this area is about 500 EL. And this is putting me closer to 50,000. Like, so
this is the surface of the sun.
Yes. Enjoy. So that's the big thing is like, had I not understood that initially, right? Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, if some is good, more is better, I could really injure somebody. And so that preset gave me the opportunity to understand where my answer to my test should be so I can then fix it later on.
There's a comment or question. I noticed on the Apilus Platinum machine, I was using, clients said that when the treatment was more comfortable when I would use longer timing and lower intensity. But I always use the preset first and then adjusted from there, which is, again, the beauty of being able to kind of understand how the body reacts to different combinations of things, like more time, less time, more intensity, less intensity, and then understanding how the heating pattern or the galvanic production changes with these things to be able to really, truly customize your treatment for, both the benefit of efficacy, but also for your client comfort and everything else.
Oh, yeah, because the outbound energy is going to be the same no matter what. Like your answer to the exam is the same, but how you got the answer could shift. And clients understand that.
It's really important that when you get a new machine, if you're uncomfortable with some of the modalities on your machine because it's not something that you do very often, it's just important to, in order to gain confidence, just schedule some time, like maybe just 30 minutes a week where you can just play around with your machine.
Oh, yeah. My students, before they get to go to a new machine, they have to read a manual. I keep the manual at every machine in a binder so that they can go through. I feel like a smart thing to start with is like to pick a feature or a mode that you haven't used yet. Mm-hmm. Read that section of the manual. Sometimes, like, so on the Silhouette Tone, they have a demo that goes with like working in different areas. They have demos about they have the manual built into the machine, which is pretty awesome because then you can tap on what went wrong within that setting or something that you were curious about, and it will bring you right to that space to find it. Which is it's such a solid move. And then we have a physical copy of that too. And I think that like being able to like watch those demos, I love the video that we actually play it all the time here at school. The one that you did for the Apilus on YouTube. I think that was a huge helper. I would love to be able to go and do each one of those to each machine in the school so that they listen to them on like repeat. But once you do that, you pick out your demo area or you pick out your demo modality, you get to know it a little bit further. In that 30 minutes that you talked about, try it on yourself, get to know the energy. If you are hairless, that becomes a little problematic. So try it on someone that that would give you the feedback. I recommend every electrologist should have an electrologist buddy, okay? Because I have treated all of you at conventions before, okay? So I know that you are always desperate to get hair removal done because we are the cobbler with the messed up shoes.
That's right.
Times.
We know better than to tweeze hairs out.
We know better. So find your bestie and start zapping on each other so you can get to know it. I think that is the best way. Test an area like your forearm or your calf where it's a little bit more resilient. You can have a little bit more bounce back. You can cover it so that if you were to play a little too hard in the sandbox, that you're not off. So
yeah, and I mean, when you go back to manuals, a lot of people tend to skip reading the manual completely. I made those videos for the Apilus because I felt like it was important for every single thing to be explained down to, the minute details. So they are a little bit long, but honestly, I think that they're important. What's nice is they've been watched so much that it's tabbed now on YouTube.
yeah,
And so you can just skip to the section. If you're, wanting to know more about the blend, you need to go to the blend sections. And then you should be reading or watching these videos next to your machine so you can push the buttons at the same time, pause the video, try it. And that's really the best way to learn how to do these modalities that you're not so comfortable with.
absolutely. That is so important. Like, that is, my teacher, Gina, just said, that's what I do in the background. And it's like, yeah, because the thing is like every machine kind of speaks a different language or speaks the same language, but a different dialect. Right.
Mhm.
So like, I think of like Italians and you have your Northern and your Southern and it's like, it's not the same thing. Like when we're talking and then we have to like think about how we learn a language. It's about immersing yourself in that space. So if you buy a new machine, are you immersing yourself in the machine that you bought? Are you acting like it's just a toy that they showed you a couple cool buttons and then we're calling it a day? If we think about this, like when she was talking about like how you have micro flash and that kind of stuff, like it is not the same on Apilus as micro flash as it is on Instantron's flash, as it is on Silhouette Tone's flash, as it is on Clareblend's flash. Like each one of them is different. And so that energy that we are dealing with a different delivery curve in that space. And if you don't get to know that curve and you went from, especially if you go from something like I did, where I went from Gentronics to Apilus, and I was like learning stuff that NASA was giving me, that it felt like in that moment, because it was such a difference for me that I had to get back down to the basics and really understand how to learn that language or that dialect of that language.
I mean, and that's really what it comes down to. If you're ever changing machines, you need to know the concepts, not just the labels.
Yeah.
So you have to understand more than just microflash and understand what microflash is, thousandths of a second, high intensity, so that when you're going to a different machine, you can understand what you're doing. Like if you're trying to compare microflash to on an Apilus to Instantron's flash, Instantron flash only goes into hundredths of a second and 0.5 at that, and that's it. And still 0.05, sorry, correction. So 0.05, and that's it. And so if you are comparing it to something on the Apilus machine, it wouldn't be microflash. It'd be closer to thermal flash. And you kind of have to understand that differentiation. And even with thermal flash, there's going to be differences as far as time and intensity. And then another thing is Instantron will display its intensity in milliamps. Apilus does it in percentages when you're talking about thermolysis.
Yeah.
So things they don't quite can translate the same way.
No. In fact, it's so funny because like I'm sitting in front of my classroom whiteboard, and up in the corner over here is actually a breakdown of understanding like the hundredths, the ones, the tens, the hundreds. And so that when people are looking at a machine, I'm like, understand where the decimal point is so that then you understand what it would look like on the next one. Because that's what we're doing. We're understanding down to the decimal point of the shifts in energy. And you've got to understand, if your machine only adjusts in the tens, that adjustment on something that adjusts to the thousandths is going to look a lot different. And you'll have more movement between one section to the next and one that does in the thousands than you will in the tens. Okay. So I think it's really important in that space. I think that if we think about, like you said, the concepts of it, a good way to like have a practical exercise in this is take a single body part. I would say forearm or calf, just because that way you can kind of get at least a stretch. If you can do a calf so that you can
have, the hairs, you'll have more anagens there if you still have hair there.
Exactly. And I would say that take that area, go into like an adjacent area. I like to use and I have because I always tell Joanie, I like have these nearby. Take a marker, mark up the area. Okay. Write what you did in each area. So I would say if your machine had the 3 modalities on it, okay, I would put basically galvanic, thermolysis, blend in the middle. And then I would write that on my arm and I would take a picture of it so I could show what my before looked like. And then I would then track that so that I could follow what that looks like down the road on my regrowth patterns and that kind of stuff. And so if you take those 3 adjacent zones, you do 1 in blend, 1 in thermolysis, 1 in straight up galvanic, observe the skin for immediate response. And then again, 24 hours, 48 hours, that also will start to help you understand what current is like on your table so that you can say to your clients, well, if I utilize this modality, it typically looks like this as your downtime. It looks like this as your regrowth rate. You can become, I mean, I know that we're trying to push you guys all into research because, you know, we need researchers, data collectors, but you could be a data collector in your own spot and have the realest version of what that machine is like in your hands and be able to describe it. You can describe sensation to your, like sensation for you to your clients so they can figure out if they're like you or if they have a different type of nervous system response than you do. You can explain the downtime and what that looks like. If you're lucky enough to have like a darker Fitzpatrick and be able to then say like, oh, on a darker Fitzpatrick, it looks like this within these modalities. All of those are things that you can take in and get to know what that machine was doing for you.
That's right. And, you know, remember that technique remains the same. So this isn't technically your insertion is going to be the same. What you're really noting is how it feels, if the skin stays pink, how easily the hair releases. And that's the kind of hands-on education that you can't get from any kind of preset.
No. Yeah. And then, like I said, document it. Okay. Like create a practice log. I had a binder here at school for a long time. We recently went digital for this, so I don't have the binder any longer, but it would have like basically sheets upon sheets. And anytime I would practice or try out a new machine in the office, I would have what that log looked like. For me, that was huge. I talked about hair type. I talked about area, the machine settings, probes, the outcomes in that space. I think that you can create that internal reference guide that then helps you in a consultation in marketing yourself. I think that every part of that's beneficial.
That's right. So a lot of this, you know, when you see the results of what you're doing, what your notes tell you, you can then start to really refine your timing and your intensity. And really, that's how presets were born. Mm-hmm. So it was data collection across tons of professionals who reported back that for this size hair, I typically use this kind of timing, this kind of intensity. They collected enough data to be able to group it into things. And they said a hair that is this density tends to need this much power, and they created a preset, time intensity. Does that mean that that preset works in all cases where that hair is that size? No, but that's where your professionalism should step in so that you can then go outside of the presets by kind of doing these little tweaks in order to make it customizable.
The Electrology Education Coalition has a wide variety of home study courses. Want to keep learning on your own time? We have a growing library of home study courses covering advanced techniques, ethics, business planning, and more. Earn CEUs, stay sharp, and continue building your skills. Explore the catalog at electrologycoalition.com.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think that another important thing, so like if you're a blend operator or getting into blend or getting into galvanic, I think that a way for you to start understanding how to energy like spillover of lye, either utilizing raw egg white and doing egg white, utilizing raw meat and doing the meat, but honestly, a sponge test, okay? Get yourself a fair colored sponge. I would say like white or light yellow, or like a light pink. Then soaking it in a saline solution and then doing current right into the sponge. You can actually see the patterns of the buildup of that lye on the surface of the sponge over time. And you can kind of see what those intensities and the spillovers look like, because it's hard as a blend operator not to get excited when I see spillover of lye. Okay. Cause like we were told for years and years, like that's what to look for. But then we understood like the more spillover we have, sometimes the more downtime we have because we're doing little mini chemical peels on somebody and they might not be
Right. Yeah.
right?
That spillover is now on the surface of the skin.
Yes. And so the higher the volume and the tighter the clearance pattern, the worse that could be for someone, right? So being able to understand what that could look like for someone is huge. And then taking what those ratios were and then putting that number into your body is huge. It's also a very helpful tool anyway, because inserting into a sponge and doing the current is very similar to the same speed of what you'd be inserting into someone's spongy skin, right? So,
Yep. And if you're in a humid climate, galvanic can feel faster because there's more natural moisture in the follicle. And that's really the main thing that affects light production.
Oh, yeah. Machines definitely, they can't sense the humidity, but or hydration. So you see it in your treatment room. We're going into our wet season here. And it's kind of funny because like all the clients are coming in and I'm like, their like hairs are like kind of juicy for me.
Nice.
Like, super juicy. And I was like, this is amazing. But I'm also noticing less downtime in that space when I get to zap on them. And it's because we're shifting what one of the climates that you adjust in your treatment room would be the moisture of your room as well in that space. So you have to know what's happening in the humidity. If people are spending, I always joke, like if you went out for tacos and margaritas last night, it's going to be a way different treatment today than it would be the previous time that you came in here, because what has happened internally in your body actually impacts your treatment itself.
That's right. And that's what makes us professionals. Your machine is smart, but it doesn't think, right? So it's not AI integrated just yet.
Just yet. Yeah. So I think that like understanding energy equivalence was a great question that we had. So one of our listeners, and I can't remember who, so Joanie, if you remember who it is, you can always say, but let's talk about some numbers here. Something super insightful in these moments, like how is the estimated energy level the same if I choose finer hair versus so say, for example, they pick out finer hair and they're choosing multiplex versus microflash on their machine. Or they might be choosing, for example, a fine hair area or a fine hair setting on their machine. How does that change?
And that's a pretty classic question. Honestly, you have to remember that when you're picking presets, it's meant to be calibrated for that size hair. And so if you are picking something like multiplex and so multiplex and Apilus modality. So let's say that I'm doing upper lip 3 multiplex and it reads 200 energy levels. Well, if I switch to microflash and it still reads around 200 energy levels, the reason why that is because you're still in an upper lip 3, which is assumed to need about 200 energy levels in order to release that hair. And so everything is going to be calibrated based on that specifically. So it doesn't matter what modality it is, unless you're using the synchro on the XLs. That's the only one that kind of isn't calibrated quite right. But everything is meant to be around the same energy levels because that's how much energy you need to release that hair. So it's not that, I mean, it's all calculated the same. You have a board in the back if you want to write down the formula for calculating energy levels. That's pretty simple, but it's based on time and intensity and then pulses. So it's usually going to be time multiplied by the intensity multiplied by the pulses, and usually intensity squared. So when we use something like this, we just come up with an average amount of energy needed to release a hair follicle. And so the machines are just putting this behind a preset. We've talked about presets already. So the question kind of confuses energy levels with the fact that it's not about the modality, but it's just because you're in a certain preset and they're keeping things calibrated for that preset.
Yeah. It's not factoring in things like your filament size, I mean, it is compared to what they tested in their office. So say, for example, so if I choose fine hair, so let's say you said chin 3. So if I said chin 3, right, and I'm in a flash setting, it's going to think that I'm in an ITH or insulated probe. If I'm in blend, it's going to say, oh, this is going to be calibrated for an IBL or a non-insulated probe. If I'm in galvanic, it's going to be calibrated for a non-insulated probe in that space. So when we think of these equations, one of the things that I really loved early on in getting to know machines was understanding what a range of 100 looks like in this space kind of thing. So when you see that same number across all the boards, you can then start to understand like what that machine's doing to normalize the total energy output in that. I like to look at it as like kind of when you're dieting and you're like, I need 200 calories, right? So if one meal is almonds, I get a whole lot less volume, okay? And my
10 almonds,
calories,
maybe.
I get an almond. I get a whole lot less almonds than if I'm having 200 calories of yogurt, right? I'm still having 200 calories, but what it's made up of is going to be different in that space. When we were talking earlier, and we were trying to like think about great ways to explain this to you guys, I think that one of the things that is helpful for a lot of people to understand is like if your window is 200, how do you get to that window? Is it 4 bursts of 50? Is it 2 bursts of 100? Is it 1 burst of 200? Right? You're still getting to 200, right? But how did you want to distribute that energy? Because whether if that energy is the same machine, the same megahertz across the board, okay, how that wave hits is what we are thinking about, but the answer was still 200, right? Mm-hmm. So we still have 200 calories, and I can have 200 calories of grapes, almonds, yogurt, a piece of steak, right? That 200 calories is going to happen, but how is it going to handle in the skin?
Exactly. So essentially, using that analogy, if multiplex was the almonds and microflash was the yogurt, both of them are going to be calibrated in the amount so that it equals 200 calories. Mm-hmm. And so you might get more energy and more intensity with one, less with the other. It really depends, but it all comes down to the same because it's meant to be calibrated for a certain size or a certain amount of calories, and that's it.
I mean, that's why like in galvanic current, when we talk about, and eventually we need to make a table for every machine out there like this. I feel like there's something missing, but units a lie. They are the same across the board when we think about like, we're going for 15 units, 0.3 for, 1.5 seconds, right? Like that is one way to do it. But it's also like you could do 0.15 for 3 seconds, right? You are looking at the same answer over, or not 1.5. I said that math wrong, but y'all get my gist there. Okay. I still have the same math, whether it's 3 times 5 or 5 times 3, it's still 15. Right?
So there was a question about being able to use the formula with other brand machines. And I've done that with the Instantron, actually. It just kind of came up with its own scale, but it's going to be machine specific.
It will be.
And so just like so energy levels were something that Dectro put out. Mm-hmm. And there's different scales depending on what frequency machine you have. So the scale that we use for the 13.56 megahertz machine, so we're talking about the juniors and the seniors, is going to be different than the scales that we use for the XLs and the platinums because the frequency is different. Yeah. So if you're using something like an Instantron, it's going to be closer to the scale that you would come up with the senior, but those machines have different power outputs because they're just built differently. And so whatever you come up with, and you can do this by figuring out, like I figured out presets for those machines. We have some at the school. So I figured out presets for those, like fine hair, medium. I kept it simple, right? And you can do this. So find a fine hair, figure out time and intensity to release the hair. You get a general time and intensity, call it your fine hair preset. You can always adjust from there. Do the same with medium, with coarse, with extra coarse. And then go ahead and plug it into that formula. So if it was a 0.05, let's say I'm in flash for a fine hair and it's 0.05 and I have maybe 0.60 MA and I'm doing one pulse, then I would do 0.60 squared and then I would multiply that by my 0.05 Or I think you have to get rid of the decimal in order for it to work.
You have to move over the decimal one.
Yeah, so you would do, because you have to translate it into a percentage, because remember, it's from Dectro, and Dectro uses percentages. So do 60 squared, so 60 times 60, which is 3,600, multiply that by your time, which is 0.05, and you get 180. And that pretty much correlates with what the Apilus for 13.56 ranges are. So yes, it's perfectly doable to do this with different machines. Come up with your presets, then come up with, for fine, medium, coarse, extra coarse, just like the scale of the UL chart. And then after that, just go ahead and plug in the numbers into the formula, and you can give yourself kind of a quote unquote range of what that might look like.
Yeah, I mean, like Silhouette Tone uses units of energy, so UE and UL versus EL and UL. They're same thing, different company, but like you can do the same thing within that. One of the cool things that when I talked to Silhouette Tone about it, I was like, hey, do you happen to have this for yours? And they didn't, but they explained how to get it, which was that. And then they explained basically how the energy delivers differently than what I've experienced previously. Okay.
Yeah.
So for example, they have that vectorial modulation, which is basically for those who have used either manual foot pedals, okay, so dual foot pedal, or for example, like the Apilus, where you can flip flop on your blend, basically leading with a burst of one type of energy and then trailing off with the other is a better way to explain it. So on theirs, the vectorial modulation is a burst of energy, and then it basically slowly bell curves down the entire time, or slowly slopes down, so that the pain was delivered initially before your body could receive the sensation, typically. And then it then trails off and becomes less intense over time. Where like in a multi-needle, when I do multi, you would have an actual curve where the current comes on, it builds until it hits its full intensity, and then it drops back down in the equal time. So depending on how, and Apilus has this in their manuals, where it shows you what the graph can look like. So if you had time and intensity, right, and you had those two bars, what does that energy look like? Well, in certain machines, your energy might lead with thermolysis or might end with thermolysis, or vice versa. Or, for example, on the Apilus, you could go into different micro modalities in that space and understand that different micro modality, the presets in there, is what it's telling you is prime for those spaces. So if I'm working in a pico flash, for example, there, I understand I'm working with a finer hair, usually under 200 energy level in that space. And I'm usually breaking down that current over the course of pulses, where on something like a synchro, I'm not doing pulses. My goal is one burst.
Yeah.
That space.
There's actually a good question about pulsing here. So there was, so if you set the machine to automatically pulse 2 or more times, it doesn't double the ELs. So does that mean that it's a percentage less? So this would be, it change how pulsing is done changes based on the machine that you're using. So the Apilus, for example, when you set your pulses on the machine, I'm not talking about manual tapping. If we're doing manual tapping, this does not apply. But if you are setting the pulses on the machine is going to automatically reduce the intensity of the second pulse or third or fourth or whatever. And the reason for that is because it assumes that there is some residual heat in the follicle from the first burst. So you're not starting from skin temperature. You're actually starting at a slightly elevated temperature because you've already put some heat in there. And so that second pulse doesn't need to be as intense. And so it will reduce that intensity for the second and third and whatever else pulse. So when you're looking at the energy levels, you'll notice that it's not exactly double the energy level of a single pulse. And it's because of that. But other machines do it differently. The Instantron, for example, actually divides. And so if I set my machine to, let's say, a flash, and I do 0.2 seconds at 0.6 TMA, if I do 2 pulses or 3 pulses, it will take the totality of my intensity and just split it in segments. So it doesn't multiply. So some pulses can multiply, some can divide. Apilus tends to multiply, but it's not an exact multiplication. As we just talked about, it's kind of reduced. An Instantron is a dividing. And so it will take that pulse and just cut it up into segments. And so whatever setting you set is all you're getting. If you want more intensity, you're either manually double tapping, because this would be different, or you are just setting it to a higher setting. How about the evolution?
Same. So basically it's not a division, it's an exponential of, okay? So it is like in the old school machines where you tap your foot pedal and then you tap it again, okay? It's delivering that energy twice. And so if, for example, when we talk about that, I'm going to say 200 again. If I wanted my units of energy to be at 200 by the end of that current, I would actually have to divide my energy in half if I put a repetition in there. So if, for example, I was at, let's say 100% at a tenth of a second, okay, I could actually reduce myself down to like a 40, 50, 60 range percentage, and then increase my time a little bit so that I offset some of that reduction in energy, so that when I go and pulse the second time, it's not doing 200 twice. I didn't need 400 in there.
So it gives you essentially a perfect multiplication. So there's just going to be twice the same thing.
It's an exponent of itself. So you are doing exactly what you did the previous time with a delay of about.
So it's like manual tapping, essentially. When most people are doing manual taps on an Apilus machine, it's going to be the same concept in that. It's a little bit different when you set it on the machine, but that's kind of what it comes down to. So it's important when you have a machine. And Crystal, can you talk on the Clareblend a little bit? So you've used it, you have it at the school. What's the pulsing like on that machine?
The pulsing on that one is it's a multiplication of it as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's depends on the type of machines. If you've ever watched the Dr. Schuster videos, you'll notice that that he talks about division, and the Hinkle book talks about division when it talks about pulsing. It's a little bit different.
Yeah. And then Michaela says, am I talking about silhouette tone when I was saying that? Yes. I am talking about silhouette tone on that one.
So I think that the big takeaway here is going to be curiosity. You have to build confidence by not avoiding what you don't know, but by actually trying to explore it.
Yeah, I think that it's important to remember, like, those moments where you're feeling pretty unsure about it. Like, usually that's kind of where your growth starts to come anyway, where it's waiting for you. It's okay not to know everything all the time. Heck, Joanie and I don't even know it. We're literally asking each other questions about our machines live on a recording, right?
Well, I asked, exactly. Yeah. And I asked Stephanie to come and teach me my multi-needle machine. So there you go. It never ends, guys, unfortunately.
I think that it's important to understand that to be a curious technician, it's the best form of being a technician, because it means that you're always trying to do the best version of what you do as a career for your clients.
And so for this week, challenge yourself. Pick one feature that you've never used on your machine. There's got to be one. There's at least that you don't use a lot. Like, I know that for me, Stephanie knows this, I don't really do blend. And so that could be my challenge for this week, right? To kind of figure out a client that is going to be okay with me practicing some of that on them. But pick something, a mode, a timing option, even just a different probe size, and give it just 5 minutes of focus. Just try to see what you can do with it.
Yeah, and make it playful. When you're telling your clients about switching modalities on them, don't explain it as this one I've heard is more painful or less painful. In fact,
I've never done this before. Let's see if I can see if it works.
I'm trying to master this new modality that I do rarely, and I would like to do this on you.
I think you would be a good candidate for this today. Let's give that a go. That's usually enough. That tends to be the times when I will pull out the blend, is because this case I think would benefit from it.
Absolutely. And I think that when you're doing that, like, make sure that you are saying that you can do hard things, explore, and you're going to be pretty amazed with the clarity that comes from that observation.
And talk to your peers, ask others what machine they use, what settings they love. And that's really what this is kind of all about. That's what we kind of hope that you get out of this today, is just building community knowledge. so that we can get out of our always call us working in caves by ourselves in the dark, just because that's kind of how it is, just on our own little islands. And so it's just, let's build a bridge and see what others are doing.
Love it. I feel like the moment that we have that aha, like I got it, it's pretty cool. Suddenly you feel like you understand the why behind what you do. And as a new person, understand that the why sometimes comes from trust from your peers first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's it.
Exactly.
Anything else, Joe?
It looks like there's a question here. Does synchro break one pulse into the same time, downtime, and intensity in each subpulse? So synchro is kind of like modeled after what IPLs do. So it's bursts of energy. When you're on an XL and you're reading 2-3, what you have is a 2 millisecond pulse with a 3 millisecond thermal relaxation. And that repetition, so the totality of it will be a 5 millisecond segment. If you take the total time of your synchro, let's say it's 0.23, and you divide that by 0.005, you will have how many micropulses you have in that time, in that pulse. Clients can't really feel, those micropulses are just too fast, but they are all going to be the same length. And so if you have a 3-4, then it's a 3 millisecond pulse, 4 millisecond thermal relaxation, so 7 milliseconds in total, etc.
Yeah, and that's what the vectorial modulation is with the serotonin. It's an understanding of that the bursts of energy that are in there, so that we can do the job with a little less work behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, pretty cool. You are very
right.
All right. Well, you have fun at the convention. Everybody,
Yeah, thank you. I'm leaving for AEA tomorrow. I think I have to be up in not much time, less than 12 hours or so. So
I won't be there. I have a full classroom and I have nobody to take over my classroom. So please.
Who's going to the AEA, by the way, in here? I don't know if anybody's going to be there.
Who dat?
But it's in New Orleans, so if you are, we'll see you there.
That's why I said who dat. Sorry. It's the Who Dat Nation. Think of me when you're eating beignets.
All right, everybody. Have a great evening.
Well, they won't let you in. Not yet. Do they not let students? Or she's a recent grad.
Anybody can go.
No, it's too late to register. They said you can't. It's too late to register.
Oh, too late to register. Yeah, probably they closed registration. Yes.
Yeah, they did.
Unfortunately.
That's a bummer.
They have to give the hotels a head count at some point, and then it becomes kind of sticky. So
yeah, bummer. I'm like, what? Let me in. All right, Joe. Well, you have a good time. I'll see you later.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye,
everybody. If today's episode got you thinking about digging deeper into your device, we call that a win. You can find additional resources and webinars on electrologycoalition.com.
And if you like to see these visuals on these concepts, energy curves, waveform comparisons, or modality charts, we can post the links here in the Mentorship Hour portal.
Remember, mastery isn't memorizing presets. It's knowing what happens when you change them.
We'll see you next time. And until then, keep current steady, insertion smooth, and the curiosity alive.
Bye, everyone.